The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine parking lot of Westfield Shopping Center as Jasmine Williams stepped out of her gleaming midnight blue Lexus LS 500. The vehicle was stunning, its custom modifications catching the light in ways that made it appear almost ethereal. Chrome accents gleamed against the deep blue paint, and the subtle aerodynamic enhancements gave it an aggressive yet elegant stance that turned heads wherever it went. Jasmine adjusted her designer blazer and reached for her purse, completely unaware that she was being watched. At 34, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every success in her life. Her natural hair was styled in a professional crown of curls, and her makeup was flawless despite the early hour. She had an important meeting with the marketing team at Lexus headquarters, and as always, she wanted to make the right impression. What she didn't know was that Officer Ryan Bradley had been observing her from across the parking lot for the past 5 minutes. Bradley, a 12-year veteran of the Westfield Police Department, sat in his patrol car with narrowed eyes. Something about the scene didn't sit right with him. A young black woman driving a car that probably cost more than his annual salary, shopping at an upscale center at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday when most people were at work. Bradley adjusted his rearview mirror to get a better look at Jasmine as she locked her car and began walking toward the shopping center entrance. The Lexus was immaculate, clearly well-maintained, and expensive. Too expensive, he thought to himself. He'd seen plenty of drug dealers and criminals trying to flaunt their ill-gotten gains with flashy cars, and this had all the hallmarks. The officer reached for his radio, his mind already made up. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47. I've got a suspicious individual at Westfield Shopping Center, requesting backup for a potential vehicle stop." "Copy that, Unit 47. What's your location?" "Northwest corner of the main parking lot. Individual is a black female, mid-30s, driving a luxury vehicle that appears to be beyond her means." The radio crackled back with confirmation that backup was en route. Bradley stepped out of his patrol car, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his service weapon. He approached Jasmine with the swagger of a man who believed he was about to make a significant arrest. Jasmine had just reached the shopping center entrance when she heard the heavy footsteps behind her. She turned to see Officer Bradley approaching, his expression stern and his posture aggressive. Her heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain calm. She had dealt with situations like this before, unfortunately, more times than she cared to remember. "Excuse me, ma'am," Bradley called out, his voice carrying across the parking lot. "I need to speak with you." Jasmine stopped, turning to face him fully. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Bradley reached her, positioning himself slightly too close for comfort. "I need to see some identification. That your car over there?" He gestured toward the Lexus with a dismissive wave. "Yes, it is," Jasmine replied calmly, reaching into her purse for her wallet. "May I ask what this is about?" "Just answer the questions, ma'am," Bradley said, his tone growing sharper. "License and registration." Jasmine handed over her driver's license, noting how Bradley's eyes lingered on her address in the affluent Brookhaven neighborhood. His expression grew more suspicious rather than less. "Brookhaven, huh?" he said, examining the license as if it might be fake. "Nice area, expensive area. What do you do for work, Miss Williams?" "I'm an automotive designer," Jasmine replied, keeping her voice steady despite the growing irritation she felt. "I work for several major manufacturers." Bradley let out a snort of disbelief. "Automotive designer. Right. And I suppose you just designed yourself right into a $100,000 car?" "Actually, yes," Jasmine said, her patience beginning to wear thin. "That particular model happens to be one I worked on extensively. Now, may I ask why you're questioning me? I haven't done anything wrong." "We'll see about that," Bradley muttered, walking toward the Lexus. "Open the trunk." "I beg your pardon?" Jasmine followed him, her confusion growing. "Officer, you haven't told me what law I've supposedly broken. I don't consent to any searches." Bradley whirled around, his face flushing red. Don't get smart with me, lady. I've got reasonable suspicion that this vehicle may be stolen or purchased with proceeds from illegal activity. You can either cooperate or I can make this a lot harder for you. Reasonable suspicion based on what exactly? Jasmine demanded, her voice rising slightly. The fact that I'm a black woman driving a nice car? Watch your tone, Bradley snapped, his hand moving to his handcuffs. You're being detained for questioning regarding a suspicious vehicle. A small crowd of shoppers had begun to gather, their phones discreetly recording the interaction. Jasmine noticed them and felt a surge of both embarrassment and anger. This was exactly the kind of humiliation she had worked her entire life to avoid. "This is ridiculous," she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite her rising panic. "I have documentation proving I own this vehicle. I have registration, insurance, everything you could possibly need." "Then you won't mind if I take a look around," Bradley said, circling the car like a predator. "Nice rims, custom paint job, must have cost a fortune. Where'd you get the money for all this?" "I earned it," Jasmine said through gritted teeth. "Through years of hard work and education." "Sure you did," Bradley replied dismissively. "Look, we can do this easy or hard. Open the trunk. Let me take a look inside the car, and maybe we can clear this up quick." "I've told you, I don't consent to any searches," Jasmine repeated firmly. "If you suspect me of a crime, arrest me. Otherwise, I'm free to go." Bradley's face darkened. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." He reached for his handcuffs, his movements quick and aggressive. "Turn around, hands behind your back." "For what?" Jasmine demanded, backing away slightly. "What crime am I being arrested for?" "Suspicion of theft, possession of stolen property, and now resisting arrest," Bradley announced loudly, clearly performing for the growing crowd of onlookers. "I'm not resisting anything," Jasmine protested as Bradley grabbed her arm roughly. "This is harassment, pure and simple." The handcuffs clicked into place, tighter than necessary. Jasmine winced as the metal bit into her wrists. Around them, the crowd murmured their disapproval, several people openly recording the encounter with their phones. "You're making a mistake," Jasmine said as Bradley led her toward his patrol car. "When you run that VIN number, you're going to find out that car is registered to me, purchased legally, and fully insured." "We'll see about that," Bradley replied, shoving her into the back seat of his car with unnecessary force. As the patrol car doors slammed shut, Jasmine closed her eyes and tried to control her breathing. This was her worst nightmare come to life, being arrested in broad daylight for the crime of existing while black in an expensive car. But she had something that Officer Bradley didn't know about, something that would turn his world upside down once the truth came to light. The backup units arrived just as Bradley was finishing his arrest. Detective Lisa Coleman stepped out of an unmarked sedan, her experienced eyes taking in the scene. She had worked with Bradley before and knew his tendency to see crimes where none existed, particularly when it came to people of color. "What do we have, Bradley?" she asked, approaching the patrol car where Jasmine sat in the back seat. "Suspicious individual, expensive car she can't possibly afford legitimately," Bradley reported proudly. "Claims to be some kind of car designer. I've got her on suspicion of theft and possession of stolen property." Coleman frowned, walking over to examine the Lexus. It was indeed a beautiful vehicle, clearly well-maintained and obviously expensive. But something about Bradley's explanation didn't add up. "Did you run the plates?" she asked. "About to," Bradley replied, walking back to his patrol car to access the computer terminal. Detective Coleman approached the car where Jasmine sat. Through the window, she could see the woman's calm but angry expression. There was something about her demeanor that suggested she wasn't just any ordinary suspect. "Ma'am," Coleman called through the glass, "I'm Detective Coleman. Can you tell me your side of what happened here?" Jasmine looked up, grateful to see a face that seemed more reasonable than Bradley's. "Detective, I was just trying to go shopping when Officer Bradley approached me and demanded to search my car. When I refused and asked what law I had broken, he arrested me." "And the car?" "Is mine," Jasmine said firmly. "Purchased legally, registered in my name, fully insured. I have all the documentation. Coleman nodded thoughtfully. What do you do for work? I'm an automotive designer. I've worked on several Lexus models, including this one. Before Coleman could respond, Bradley's voice cut through the morning air. Well, I'll be damned, he said, staring at his computer screen. The car's registered to her. Clean title, no liens, no reports of theft. Coleman walked over to look at the screen herself. Registration current? Yeah, Bradley admitted reluctantly. Insurance is active too. Then what exactly are we arresting her for? Coleman asked, her voice carrying a note of warning. Bradley's face flushed red. Look, just because the paperwork looks clean doesn't mean the money used to buy it was legal. I've seen plenty of criminals who know how to clean their money through car purchases. Do you have any evidence of illegal activity? Coleman pressed. Any calls about suspicious behavior? Any reports of criminal activity in this area? No, but... Then we have a problem, Coleman interrupted. You've just arrested a woman for the crime of driving a nice car while black. That's not what this is about, Bradley protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Coleman gestured toward the crowd of onlookers, many of whom were still recording. Because that sure is what it looks like to everyone watching. She walked back to the patrol car and opened the door. Ma'am, I'm going to have those handcuffs removed. It appears there's been a mistake. There certainly has, Jasmine said as Coleman freed her wrists. And it's a mistake that's going to have consequences. As Jasmine rubbed her wrists where the handcuffs had left marks, she looked directly at Bradley. Officer, you have no idea what you've just done, but you're about to find out. The crowd began to disperse as it became clear the arrest was being reversed, but the damage was already done. Videos of the encounter were already being uploaded to social media, and the story was beginning to spread. What none of them knew was that this was just the beginning of a story that would make national headlines and expose the truth about who Jasmine Williams really was. 20 years earlier, Jasmine Williams had been a different person entirely. At 14, she lived in a cramped apartment in East Cleveland with her mother Sandra and her younger brother Terrell. Money was always tight, and opportunities seemed as distant as the stars. But Jasmine had always been different, always been drawn to taking things apart and putting them back together. It started with toys. While other girls her age were playing with dolls, Jasmine was in the garage with a screwdriver dismantling remote control cars to see how they worked. Her mother often found her surrounded by springs, gears, and tiny motors, her face intense with concentration as she tried to understand the mechanical mysteries before her. That girl's got something special, Sandra Williams would tell her friends. I don't understand half of what she's doing, but she's got a gift. The gift became more apparent when Jasmine entered high school. Her grades in math and science were exceptional, but it was her mechanical aptitude that truly set her apart. Her shop teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, was the first to recognize her potential. Jasmine, he said one afternoon as she finished reassembling an engine she had completely torn down, have you ever thought about engineering? Engineering. Jasmine looked up from her work, her hands still dirty with motor oil. That's for rich kids who go to fancy colleges. Not necessarily, Rodriguez replied. There are programs, scholarships. Someone with your talent shouldn't waste it. That conversation changed everything. Rodriguez spent hours after school helping Jasmine understand the possibilities that lay ahead of her. He introduced her to the concept of automotive engineering, showed her videos of car designers and engineers at work, and helped her see that her passion for taking things apart could become a career. The automotive industry needs people like you, he told her. People who understand how things work from the ground up. Jasmine threw herself into her studies with renewed vigor. She took every advanced math and science course her school offered, often staying late to work on projects that went far beyond what was required. Her notebook filled with sketches of cars, engines, and mechanical systems that existed nowhere but in her imagination. The application process for college was daunting. Coming from a family where no one had ever attended university, Jasmine had to navigate the complex world of admissions, financial aid, and scholarships largely on her own. But her grades were outstanding, her SAT scores impressive, and her portfolio of mechanical projects unique enough to catch attention. When the acceptance letter from Georgia Tech arrived, Jasmine cried for an hour. Not just because she had been accepted, but because she had received a full scholarship that would cover tuition, room, and board. Her dream of studying mechanical engineering was about to become reality. College was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Jasmine found herself surrounded by students who had grown up with advantages she could only dream of. Many of her classmates had parents who were engineers, had attended elite preparatory schools, and seemed to effortlessly navigate the academic and social challenges of university life. But Jasmine had something many of them lacked: practical experience and an unshakable work ethic. While her classmates struggled with basic mechanical concepts, she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Her professors quickly noticed her exceptional abilities. "Miss Williams," Professor Sarah Chen said after a particularly challenging thermodynamics exam, "your approach to these problems is quite unique. Where did you learn to think about engineering this way?" "In my mother's garage," Jasmine replied simply, "taking apart everything I could get my hands on." Professor Chen smiled. Sometimes the best engineers are the ones who learn by doing before they learn by studying. Jasmine's reputation grew throughout her time at Georgia Tech. She was invited to join the Formula SAE team, where students designed and built race cars to compete against other universities. It was here that her true passion for automotive design began to flourish. Working late into the night in the team's workshop, Jasmine found herself naturally gravitating toward the aesthetic aspects of car design. While her teammates focused on performance metrics and engineering specifications, she was thinking about lines, proportions, and the emotional connection between a driver and their vehicle. "You know," said her teammate Kevin Park during one late-night design session, "you should consider automotive design rather than just engineering. You've got an eye for it." "Automotive design?" Jasmine looked up from the clay model she had been sculpting. "Is that even a real career?" "Are you kidding?" Kevin laughed. "Every car on the road was designed by someone, and looking at what you're doing there, you could be really good at it." That conversation led Jasmine to research automotive design programs and internships. She discovered that several major manufacturers offered summer internship programs for students interested in design. The competition was fierce, but Jasmine had never backed down from a challenge. Her first internship was with Ford, working in their advanced design studio in Dearborn, Michigan. Walking into that building for the first time, surrounded by clay models of future vehicles and drawings of cars that wouldn't hit the road for years, Jasmine knew she had found her calling. "Welcome to the future," said Marcus Thompson, the senior designer who would serve as her mentor. "Everything you see here is 3 to 5 years away from production. Our job is to imagine what people will want to drive before they even know they want it." The internship was transformative. Jasmine learned to use professional design software, worked with clay modeling tools, and participated in design reviews where senior executives would make decisions about which concepts would move forward and which would be abandoned. But more importantly, she learned about the business side of automotive design, how market research influenced design decisions, how manufacturing constraints shaped what was possible, and how the smallest details could make or break a vehicle's success in the marketplace. "Design isn't just about making something beautiful," Marcus explained during one of their mentoring sessions. "It's about solving problems. How do you make a car that's beautiful, functional, manufacturable, and profitable all at the same time?" Jasmine absorbed every lesson, every critique, every piece of advice. She worked longer hours than any other intern, often staying late to refine her designs or study the work of legendary automotive designers. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed. "Jasmine," Marcus said toward the end of her internship, "I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've never seen a student with your combination of technical knowledge and design intuition. Have you thought about where you want to work after graduation?" The question had been weighing on Jasmine's mind for months. She had offers from several major manufacturers, each offering attractive starting salaries and the opportunity to work on exciting projects. But there was one opportunity that stood out above all others. Lexus had approached her directly, having seen her work through her professors at Georgia Tech. They were launching a new advanced design studio in California and were looking for young designers who could bring fresh perspectives to their luxury brand. We're particularly interested in designers who understand both the technical and aesthetic aspects of automotive development, the recruiter had explained. Your background in mechanical engineering combined with your design portfolio is exactly what we're looking for. The decision wasn't easy. Lexus was offering her a chance to work on high-end luxury vehicles, the kind of cars she had only dreamed of owning. But it also meant moving across the country, away from her family and everything familiar. "Take the job," her mother advised during one of their long phone conversations. "You've worked too hard to get where you are to play it safe now." Terrell, now 15 and following in his sister's academic footsteps, was more direct. "Jasmine, you'd be crazy not to take it. You've been drawing fancy cars since you were 10 years old. Now someone's going to pay you to design them for real." So Jasmine packed her belongings into her 10-year-old Honda Civic and drove west to begin her career at Lexus. The transition from college student to professional designer was challenging, but she adapted quickly. The work was demanding, requiring her to balance creativity with commercial realities, but it was everything she had dreamed it would be. Her first major project was a redesign of the LS sedan, Lexus's flagship luxury vehicle. It was a massive responsibility for a junior designer, but Jasmine's unique background made her the perfect fit for the project. "We need someone who understands luxury but also understands technology," her design director explained. "The next generation LS needs to be more than just a luxury car. It needs to be a statement about where Lexus is headed." Jasmine threw herself into the project with characteristic intensity. She spent months studying the competition, analyzing market trends, and interviewing potential customers. She visited luxury hotels, high-end restaurants, and exclusive clubs, trying to understand the lifestyle and expectations of people who could afford a $100,000 car. But she also drew on her own experiences, her journey from a working-class neighborhood in Cleveland to the pinnacle of automotive design. She understood what it meant to aspire to something better, to work toward a dream that seemed impossible. The design that emerged was revolutionary. The new LS combined traditional luxury elements with cutting-edge technology and a bold aesthetic that pushed the boundaries of what a Lexus could be. The lines were fluid yet aggressive, the proportions perfect, and every detail had been carefully considered. "This is brilliant," Marcus Thompson said when Jasmine presented her design to the executive team. He had joined Lexus shortly after her and was now working as a senior designer. "You've managed to create something that's both evolutionary and revolutionary at the same time." The executive team agreed. Jasmine's design was selected for production, and she was promoted to senior designer at the age of 28, making her one of the youngest people ever to hold that position at Lexus. But success came with challenges. As one of only a handful of black designers in the industry, and one of even fewer black women, Jasmine faced scrutiny and skepticism that her white colleagues never experienced. Some people questioned whether she had truly earned her position or if she was simply the beneficiary of diversity initiatives. "Let them question," she told herself during moments of doubt. "My work speaks for itself." And it did. The new LS was a massive success, earning critical acclaim and commercial success that exceeded all expectations. Automotive journalists praised its innovative design, and luxury car buyers embraced its bold aesthetic. More importantly for Jasmine, it established her reputation as one of the most talented designers in the industry. Over the next several years, Jasmine worked on numerous projects, each one building on her growing reputation. She designed concept cars that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, production vehicles that became bestsellers, and custom modifications for VIP clients who wanted something truly unique. By the time she turned 34, Jasmine had achieved everything she had dreamed of as a young girl, taking apart toy cars in her mother's garage. She owned a beautiful home in an exclusive neighborhood, drove cars that she had helped design, and was recognized as one of the leading automotive designers in the world. But success hadn't changed her fundamental character. She still remembered what it felt like to be underestimated, to have people assume she didn't belong simply because of the color of her skin. That memory would serve her well on a Tuesday morning in a shopping center parking lot when a police officer would make assumptions about her based on nothing more than prejudice and ignorance. What Officer Bradley didn't know as he handcuffed Jasmine and led her to his patrol car was that he had just arrested one of the most accomplished automotive designers in the country. More than that, he had arrested the woman who had designed the very car he accused her of stealing. The Westfield Police Department was buzzing with unusual activity as news of the arrest began to spread through the building. Officer Ryan Bradley sat at his desk, filling out his incident report with considerably less confidence than he had felt that morning in the shopping center parking lot. Detective Lisa Coleman had been digging into the case for the past 3 hours, and what she was finding made her increasingly uncomfortable. She had called the Lexus dealership where the car had been purchased, spoken to the insurance company, and even reached out to the Georgia Department of Motor Vehicles to verify the registration details. Everything checked out. More than that, everything checked out in ways that made Bradley's arrest look increasingly questionable. "Bradley," Coleman called from her desk across the bullpen, "come over here. We need to talk." Bradley approached reluctantly, his swagger from earlier that morning completely gone. He could sense from Coleman's tone that the conversation wasn't going to go well for him. "I just got off the phone with the Lexus dealership in Buckhead," Coleman began, her voice carefully neutral. "Jasmine Williams purchased that car 18 months ago, paid cash, full price, no financing." "Cash?" Bradley's eyebrows shot up. "How much cash?" $112,000, Coleman replied, watching Bradley's face carefully. The sales manager remembered the transaction clearly because it's unusual for someone to pay that much cash for a vehicle. Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "Look, detective, just because she paid cash doesn't mean the money was legitimate. Drug dealers pay cash all the time." "That's true," Coleman agreed. "So I did a little more digging. I ran her name through our database, checked with the DEA, even called the IRS to see if there were any flags on her tax returns. And clean as a whistle. No arrests, no investigations, no suspicious activity reports from banks. Her tax returns show exactly what you'd expect from someone earning a 6-figure salary as an automotive designer." Coleman turned her computer screen toward Bradley, displaying a printout of Jasmine's employment history. "She's worked for Lexus for 12 years, currently makes $180,000 a year, plus bonuses. Last year, her total compensation was over $200,000. Bradley stared at the screen, his face growing pale. $200,000? That's right. And according to her supervisor, who I spoke to about an hour ago, she's one of their most valued designers. She's worked on several major projects, including the redesign of the LS sedan." "The LS sedan?" Bradley repeated weakly. "The same model car you arrested her for allegedly stealing," Coleman confirmed. "The car she actually helped design." The implications were beginning to sink in for Bradley. He had arrested a successful professional for driving a car that she not only owned legally, but had actually helped create. The situation was rapidly moving from embarrassing to potentially career-ending. "There's more," Coleman continued, pulling out another file. "I called the Georgia Tech alumni office to verify her educational background. She graduated summa cum laude with a degree in mechanical engineering, then completed a master's degree in automotive design. She's been featured in several industry publications and has won awards for her work." Bradley slumped into a chair, the full weight of his mistake becoming clear. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you arrested one of the most accomplished automotive designers in the country for the crime of driving while black in an expensive car," Coleman said bluntly. "And it's all been captured on video by multiple witnesses." As if on cue, Sergeant Martinez appeared at Coleman's desk, holding a tablet computer. "Detective, you need to see this. The videos from this morning's arrest are already going viral on social media." Coleman took the tablet and watched as shaky phone footage showed Bradley approaching Jasmine, demanding to search her car and ultimately arresting her despite her calm protests. The audio was clear enough to hear every word of the exchange, including Bradley's dismissive comments about her ability to afford the vehicle. "How many views?" Coleman asked. "The main video has over 50,000 already, and it's only been online for 4 hours," Martinez replied. "The comments are not favorable to the department." Coleman scrolled through some of the comments, her expression growing grimmer with each one she read. Words like harassment, profiling, and discrimination appeared repeatedly, along with calls for Bradley to be fired and the department to be investigated. "Sir," Coleman addressed Martinez, "I think we need to brief the chief on this situation. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better." Chief Robert Harrison was a 30-year veteran of law enforcement who had seen his share of controversial arrests, but even he was taken aback by what Coleman presented to him. He watched the video footage in silence, his jaw tightening with each passing second. "Tell me this isn't as bad as it looks," he said finally. "It's worse," Coleman replied. "We arrested a prominent automotive designer for driving a car she designed herself. The optics are terrible, and the legal exposure is significant." Chief Harrison rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of what would likely be a massive headache. "Has she been released?" "Yes, sir. We released her on her own recognizance about 2 hours ago. No charges filed." "Good. What's her attitude? Is she talking to lawyers?" Coleman consulted her notes. "She was understandably angry when she left, but she was professional about it. She did mention that there would be consequences for what happened." "I'll bet she did," Harrison muttered. "Any media calls yet?" 3 local news stations have already called asking for comment. Channel 7 wants to interview her this evening." Harrison stood up and began pacing behind his desk. In his 30 years of law enforcement, he had learned to recognize when a situation had the potential to explode into a major controversy. This had all the elements: racial profiling, economic discrimination, and a sympathetic victim who had been wronged by an overzealous officer. "Where's Bradley now?" he asked. "At his desk, filling out paperwork," Coleman replied. "Bring him in here now." A few minutes later, Officer Bradley stood at attention in the chief's office, his uniform wrinkled and his confidence completely shattered. He knew this meeting wasn't going to go well, but he was still hoping to salvage his career. "Bradley," Chief Harrison began, his voice deceptively calm, "explain to me what probable cause you had to arrest Miss Williams." "Sir, I observed a suspicious individual driving a vehicle that appeared to be beyond her means," Bradley recited, falling back on the formal language of police reports. "Based on my experience, such situations often involve stolen vehicles or proceeds from illegal activity." "Based on your experience," Harrison repeated slowly. "And what exactly in your experience suggested that a well-dressed woman shopping at an upscale center in the middle of the morning was involved in criminal activity?" Bradley hesitated, realizing that any honest answer would only make his situation worse. "The vehicle was extremely expensive, sir. It seemed suspicious." "The vehicle that she purchased legally with her own money? The vehicle that she helped design in her job as a senior automotive designer for Lexus?" Harrison's voice was rising with each word. "I didn't know about her background at the time," Bradley protested. "You didn't know because you didn't bother to find out," Harrison exploded. "You made assumptions based on nothing more than the color of her skin and the car she was driving." The room fell silent except for the sound of Harrison's heavy breathing. Coleman watched from her chair, knowing that Bradley's career was likely over, but also knowing that the damage extended far beyond one officer's poor judgment. "Sir," Bradley said weakly, "I was just trying to do my job." "Your job," Harrison replied coldly, "is to serve and protect the citizens of this community, not to harass successful professionals because they don't fit your narrow assumptions about who deserves to drive a nice car." Harrison walked to his window, looking out at the parking lot where media vans were already beginning to gather. "Bradley, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Turn in your badge and gun." "Chief, please." "Now," Harrison barked. "And consider yourself lucky if suspension is the worst thing that happens to you. Miss Williams would be well within her rights to file a civil rights lawsuit that could cost this department millions." After Bradley left, his head hanging in shame, Harrison turned to Coleman. "What's our exposure here?" "Significant," Coleman replied honestly. "False arrest, violation of civil rights, possible grounds for a discrimination lawsuit, and that's before we factor in the public relations nightmare." "Recommendations?" Coleman had been thinking about this question for the past hour. "We need to get ahead of this story. Full transparency, accept responsibility, and show concrete steps we're taking to prevent it from happening again." Such as mandatory retraining on bias and profiling, body cameras for all officers, and a civilian review board to investigate complaints. We also need to reach out to Miss Williams directly and try to make this right. Harrison nodded grimly. "Set up a meeting with her as soon as possible, and get our media relations person in here. We're going to need to do some serious damage control." Meanwhile, across town at her home in Brookhaven, Jasmine Williams was fielding phone calls from reporters, friends, and colleagues who had seen the video of her arrest. Her phone hadn't stopped ringing since she'd arrived home, and the attention was both overwhelming and infuriating. Her brother Terrell had driven up from Atlanta as soon as he heard what happened, and he was pacing around her living room with barely contained rage. "I can't believe this happened to you," he said for the 10th time. "In 2024, and this still happens." "Unfortunately, it's not as uncommon as people think," Jasmine replied wearily. "The only difference is that this time it was recorded." The doorbell rang, and Jasmine looked through the peephole to see a well-dressed man in his 50s standing on her porch with a briefcase. She opened the door cautiously. "Miss Williams, I'm David Morrison, attorney with Morrison, Burke & Associates. I specialize in civil rights cases, and I'd like to discuss what happened to you this morning." Jasmine had been expecting this call, though she hadn't expected the lawyer to show up at her door so quickly. "Come in, Mr. Morrison." Morrison settled into her living room, declining her offer of coffee. "Miss Williams, I've reviewed the video footage of your arrest, and I believe you have grounds for a significant civil rights lawsuit against the Westfield Police Department." "I'm not interested in money," Jasmine said firmly. "I'm interested in making sure this doesn't happen to someone else." "Those two goals aren't mutually exclusive," Morrison replied. "A successful lawsuit sends a message that this kind of behavior has consequences. It forces policy changes and holds departments accountable." Terrell leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of case are we talking about? False arrest? Violation of Fourth Amendment rights? Racial profiling? Intentional infliction of emotional distress?" Morrison ticked off the charges on his fingers. "Based on the clear video evidence and the complete lack of probable cause, this is a very strong case." Jasmine was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications of what Morrison was proposing. She had worked hard to build her reputation and career, and part of her just wanted to put this incident behind her and move on. But another part of her, the part that remembered being a young girl who was told she couldn't achieve her dreams, knew that staying silent would be a disservice to others who might face similar treatment. "Mr. Morrison," she said finally, "if I decide to pursue this, what would be the timeline?" "These cases can take anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on whether the department wants to settle or fight it in court," Morrison explained. "But given the video evidence and the high-profile nature of this case, I suspect they'll want to settle relatively quickly to avoid further negative publicity." The phone rang again, and Jasmine glanced at the caller ID. It was her boss at Lexus, Marcus Thompson, who had been promoted to design director the previous year. "I should take this," she said, answering the phone. "Jasmine, I just saw the news." Marcus's voice was filled with concern. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Embarrassed and angry, but fine. The entire design team is talking about it. We can't believe what happened to you. Is there anything the company can do?" Jasmine appreciated the support, but she also knew that Lexus would want to avoid any controversy that might affect their brand. "I don't think so, but thank you for asking. Actually, there might be something. Marcus said, his tone changing slightly. The executive team has been discussing this, and we think there might be a way to turn this negative situation into something positive. What do you mean? We're planning to release a statement supporting you and highlighting your contributions to the company. But more than that, we want to use this as an opportunity to showcase the diversity and talent of our design team. Would you be willing to participate in some media interviews about your work and your experience? Jasmine looked at Morrison and Terrell, both of whom were listening intently to her side of the conversation. The idea of more media attention was daunting, but she could see the value in controlling the narrative. "Let me think about it and get back to you," she said. After she hung up, Morrison leaned forward. "That could actually work in our favor. The more positive publicity you get, the more pressure it puts on the police department to take responsibility for what happened." "I need some time to think about all of this," Jasmine said. "This morning, I was just trying to go shopping, and now I'm dealing with lawyers and media requests and potential lawsuits." "Take all the time you need," Morrison said, standing to leave. "But don't wait too long. The statute of limitations for civil rights cases is limited, and public attention has a way of moving on to other stories." After Morrison left, Jasmine and Terrell sat in her living room, processing everything that had happened. The weight of the situation was beginning to sink in, and Jasmine realized that her life had changed irrevocably in the span of a few hours. "What are you going to do?" Terrell asked. "I'm going to fight," Jasmine said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "Not just for me, but for every person who's been treated the way I was treated today. Officer Bradley made a mistake when he assumed I was someone I wasn't. Now he's going to learn exactly who he messed with." The next morning brought a media frenzy unlike anything Westfield had seen in decades. News vans lined the street outside the police department, and reporters were stationed at every entrance, hoping to catch interviews with officers or city officials. The story had gone national overnight, with major news networks picking up the footage of Jasmine's arrest and running it as a prime example of racial profiling in America. Inside the police department, Chief Harrison was dealing with a crisis that seemed to grow worse by the hour. His phone hadn't stopped ringing with calls from city officials, civil rights organizations, and media outlets demanding answers and accountability. "Chief," Detective Coleman knocked on his office door. "Miss Williams is here for the meeting." Harrison looked up from the stack of incident reports on his desk, each one documenting the fallout from Bradley's arrest. "Send her in." Jasmine entered the office accompanied by David Morrison and a woman Harrison didn't recognize. She was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray business suit, her posture confident and professional. Despite everything she had been through, she carried herself with the dignity of someone who refused to be diminished by the actions of others. "Miss Williams," Harrison stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for coming. I'm Chief Harrison." "Chief," Jasmine replied, her handshake firm and her gaze steady. "This is my attorney, David Morrison, and my colleague from Lexus, Marketing Director Kendra Foster." After everyone was seated, Harrison cleared his throat. "Miss Williams, I want to start by offering you a formal apology on behalf of the Westfield Police Department. What happened to you yesterday was completely unacceptable and does not represent the values or standards of our organization." "I appreciate the apology, Chief," Jasmine replied, "but apologies don't address the systemic issues that led to my arrest in the first place." Morrison leaned forward slightly. "Chief Harrison, we've reviewed the incident report filed by Officer Bradley, and frankly, it's filled with inaccuracies and justifications that have no basis in fact." "I'm aware of the problems with the report," Harrison acknowledged. "Officer Bradley has been suspended pending a full investigation." "That's a start," Jasmine said, "but it's not enough. I want to know what concrete steps you're taking to ensure this doesn't happen to someone else." Kendra Foster, who had been silent until now, opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Chief, before we discuss solutions, I think you should understand exactly who Officer Bradley arrested yesterday." She handed the folder to Harrison, who opened it to find a comprehensive portfolio of Jasmine's professional achievements. There were photographs of her with automotive industry executives, copies of awards she had won, and articles from trade publications highlighting her work. Miss Williams isn't just any automotive designer, Kendra explained. She's one of the most respected professionals in the industry. The car your officer accused her of stealing? She was the lead designer on that project. Harrison flipped through the pages, his expression growing more grim with each accomplishment he read. Miss Williams, I had no idea of the extent of your professional background. That's exactly the problem, Jasmine replied. Officer Bradley didn't bother to find out who I was or what I did for a living. He made assumptions based solely on my appearance and decided I was a criminal. And those assumptions, Morrison added, were clearly based on racial bias. There's no other explanation for why a well-dressed woman shopping in an upscale area would be considered suspicious simply for driving a nice car. Chief Harrison closed the folder and set it on his desk. The weight of the situation was becoming clearer by the minute. This wasn't just a case of poor judgment by one officer. It was a public relations disaster that could have lasting consequences for the entire department. What do you want from us? He asked directly. Jasmine had been thinking about this question since the moment she was handcuffed in the parking lot. I want systemic change. I want mandatory bias training for all officers. I want body cameras to be required equipment, not optional. And I want a civilian oversight board to review complaints against officers. Those are significant changes, Harrison said carefully. This is a significant problem, Jasmine replied, and it's going to require significant solutions. Morrison pulled out his own folder and placed it on the desk. Chief, we're prepared to file a federal civil rights lawsuit if necessary, but we'd prefer to work with the department to create meaningful change. What kind of timeline are we looking at? Harrison asked. 60 days to implement the body camera requirement and establish the oversight board, Morrison replied. 6 months for the bias training program to be fully operational. Harrison knew he was in no position to negotiate. The video evidence was damning, the public outcry was growing, and the city's legal exposure was enormous. I'll need to discuss this with the city attorney and the mayor. Of course, Jasmine said, standing to leave. But Chief, understand that my patience has limits. I was humiliated and arrested for no reason other than the color of my skin. That's not something I'm going to let slide. After they left, Harrison immediately called Mayor Patricia Webb to brief her on the situation. Webb, a pragmatic politician who understood the potential ramifications of the incident, was already working on damage control. Bob, she said as soon as he walked into her office, please tell me you have a plan to fix this mess. I'm working on it, Harrison replied, but we're dealing with someone who has significant resources and public support. This isn't going to go away quietly. What's she asking for? Harrison outlined Jasmine's demands, watching as the mayor's expression grew more serious with each item on the list. That's going to cost money, Webb said finally. Not as much as a civil rights lawsuit would cost, Harrison pointed out, and the damage to our reputation is already significant. We need to show that we're taking concrete action. Webb nodded reluctantly. Draft a proposal, but make sure it's something we can actually implement and sustain long-term. Meanwhile, across town, Jasmine was preparing for what would be the most important media appearance of her life. Channel 7 had requested an exclusive interview, and she had agreed to sit down with veteran journalist Rebecca Martinez to tell her side of the story. The interview was scheduled to take place at Jasmine's home, and the production crew had arrived early to set up cameras and lighting. As Jasmine sat in her makeup chair, she reflected on how surreal the entire situation had become. You ready for this? Terrell asked, adjusting his tie. He had insisted on being present during the interview to provide moral support. As ready as I can be, Jasmine replied. I just want people to understand that this isn't about me personally. It's about a system that allows people to make assumptions about others based on nothing more than prejudice. Rebecca Martinez was a seasoned journalist who had covered civil rights issues for over 20 years. She understood the significance of Jasmine's story and the potential impact it could have on police reform efforts. Miss Williams, she began once the cameras were rolling. "Take us back to yesterday morning. What happened?" Jasmine recounted the events calmly and precisely, her voice steady as she described Officer Bradley's approach, his demands to search her car, and his ultimate decision to arrest her despite her compliance with his requests. "At what point did you realize this was about more than just a routine police encounter?" Martinez asked. "When he asked me where I got the money to buy the car," Jasmine replied. "That's when I knew this wasn't about law enforcement. It was about his assumption that someone who looked like me couldn't possibly afford to own a vehicle like that legitimately. You're a successful automotive designer with an impressive career. How did it feel to be treated like a criminal?" Jasmine paused, choosing her words carefully. "It felt like everything I had worked for, every achievement I had earned, meant nothing in that moment. To Officer Bradley, I wasn't a professional or a contributor to society. I was just another black woman who needed to be put in her place." The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with Jasmine discussing her background, her career achievements, and her hopes for meaningful police reform. When it was over, she felt emotionally drained, but also empowered by the opportunity to control her own narrative. "That was powerful," Martinez said as the crew packed up their equipment. "I think it's going to have a significant impact." The interview aired that evening during the primetime news slot, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with support for Jasmine and calls for Officer Bradley to be fired. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine began trending nationwide, and celebrities and public figures began weighing in on the incident. But the most significant response came from an unexpected source. The next morning, Jasmine received a call from Dr. James Patterson, the CEO of Lexus USA. "Miss Williams," Dr. Patterson said, "I've been following this story closely, and I want you to know that the entire Lexus family is behind you. What happened to you is completely unacceptable." "Thank you, Dr. Patterson. I appreciate the support." "I'm calling because we want to do more than just offer support. We want to take action. We're planning to release a comprehensive statement about this incident, and we're also establishing a scholarship fund in your name for underrepresented students pursuing careers in automotive design." Jasmine was stunned. "A scholarship fund? We believe that diversity in design leads to better products and a better industry," Dr. Patterson explained. "Your experience is a reminder that talent exists in every community, and we need to do a better job of identifying and nurturing that talent." The announcement of the scholarship fund generated even more positive publicity for Jasmine and additional pressure on the Westfield Police Department to take meaningful action. By the end of the week, Chief Harrison was ready to meet Jasmine's demands in full. "We're prepared to accept your terms," he told Morrison during a phone call. "Body cameras, bias training, civilian oversight board, all of it." "And Officer Bradley?" Morrison asked. "He's been terminated," Harrison replied. "His actions were a disgrace to the badge and to the department." The formal agreement was signed 2 weeks later in a ceremony attended by city officials, civil rights leaders, and members of the media. Jasmine stood at the podium in the city council chambers, looking out at the crowd that had gathered to witness this moment of accountability and change. "This agreement isn't just about what happened to me," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "It's about ensuring that no one else has to go through what I experienced. It's about creating a system where people are judged by their character and actions, not by the color of their skin or the assumptions others make about them." The applause was sustained and heartfelt, but Jasmine knew that the real work was just beginning. Changing policies was one thing, changing hearts and minds was another challenge entirely. 6 months after the incident that had thrust her into the national spotlight, Jasmine Williams stood in the same Westfield shopping center parking lot where her life had been turned upside down. But this time, she wasn't alone, and she wasn't there as a victim. She was there as a symbol of change and progress. The occasion was the official launch of the Westfield Police Department's new Community Policing Initiative, a comprehensive program designed to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities they served. As part of the settlement agreement, Jasmine had been invited to speak at the ceremony, and her presence carried significant symbolic weight. Chief Harrison approached the podium first, his expression serious as he addressed the crowd of community members, police officers, and media representatives who had gathered for the event. 6 months ago, this department failed one of our citizens in the most fundamental way possible, he began, his voice carrying across the parking lot through the sound system. We made assumptions instead of conducting proper investigations. We acted on bias instead of evidence, and we violated the trust that our community places in us to serve and protect all citizens equally. The crowd listened in respectful silence as Harrison continued. Today marks not just an apology, but a commitment to do better. The reforms we're implementing today are comprehensive and permanent. They will ensure that what happened to Miss Williams never happens again. He gestured toward Jasmine, who sat in the front row wearing a navy blue blazer and a confident smile. Miss Williams could have simply accepted our apology and moved on with her life. Instead, she chose to use this painful experience as a catalyst for positive change. Her courage and determination have made our entire community safer and more just. When it was Jasmine's turn to speak, she walked to the podium with the same confident stride that had carried her through boardrooms and design studios throughout her career. The crowd fell silent as she adjusted the microphone and looked out at the assembled faces. When Officer Bradley handcuffed me in this parking lot 6 months ago, I felt anger, humiliation, and frustration, she began. But I also felt something else: determination. Determination to ensure that my experience would lead to meaningful change, not just for me, but for everyone in this community. She paused, her gaze finding several police officers who were standing near the back of the crowd. Some looked uncomfortable, but many seemed genuinely engaged with her message. The reforms being implemented today aren't punitive measures designed to make police work harder, she continued. They're tools to help officers do their jobs better and to rebuild the trust that is essential for effective law enforcement. Jasmine went on to detail the specific changes that had been implemented: mandatory bias training for all officers, body cameras for every patrol unit, a civilian oversight board with real authority to investigate complaints, and a community policing program that would put officers in regular contact with residents outside of enforcement situations. But technology and policies alone won't solve the underlying problems, she said, her voice growing stronger. Real change requires each of us to examine our own assumptions and biases. It requires us to see each other as human beings first, regardless of race, economic status, or any other superficial differences. The applause that followed was sustained and genuine, but Jasmine wasn't finished. I want to share something with you that Officer Bradley didn't know when he arrested me, she said, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The car he accused me of stealing? I didn't just own it legally, I designed it. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Jasmine continued. I spent 3 years working on the design team that created the Lexus LS 500. Every curve, every line, every detail was carefully considered and crafted. When I bought that car, I wasn't just purchasing a vehicle. I was celebrating the culmination of my life's work. The revelation sent a buzz through the crowd, and even some of the police officers seemed taken aback by this information. Jasmine had deliberately saved this detail for maximum impact. Officer Bradley's assumptions weren't just wrong, she said, her voice carrying a note of steel. They were spectacularly, embarrassingly wrong. And that's the danger of making judgments based on prejudice rather than facts. In the months following the ceremony, the changes in Westfield became a model for police departments across the country. The bias training program, developed in consultation with civil rights organizations and academic experts, was comprehensive and ongoing rather than a one-time requirement. Officers attended monthly sessions that addressed not just explicit bias, but the unconscious assumptions that could influence their interactions with the public. The body camera program was implemented with full transparency, with footage automatically uploaded to a secure server that could be accessed by the Civilian Oversight Board. Officers initially resisted the constant monitoring, but many eventually found that the cameras protected them from false accusations while also encouraging more professional behavior. The Civilian Oversight Board, composed of community members from diverse backgrounds, had real authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action. Their monthly meetings were open to the public and regularly attended by citizens who wanted to stay informed about police accountability efforts. But perhaps most importantly, the community policing program put officers in regular contact with residents in non-enforcement situations. Officers attended community meetings, participated in neighborhood events, and worked with local organizations on crime prevention and community improvement projects. Detective Lisa Coleman, who had been promoted to lieutenant in recognition of her professional handling of the incident, became the department's liaison to the community policing program. She often reflected on how different things might have been if Officer Bradley had simply approached Jasmine as a fellow human being rather than a potential suspect. The irony is that if Bradley had just introduced himself politely and explained that he was conducting routine security checks, Jasmine probably would have been happy to talk with him, Coleman told new recruits during training sessions. She might have even told him about her work with Lexus. Instead, his assumptions and prejudices turned a potential positive interaction into a national embarrassment for our department. Bradley himself had largely disappeared from public view after his termination. He had moved to another state and taken a job in private security, though his prospects for future law enforcement work were virtually non-existent. The incident had effectively ended his career in policing, a consequence that served as a powerful deterrent to other officers who might be tempted to act on their biases. Meanwhile, Jasmine's career had reached new heights. The publicity from the incident had made her one of the most recognizable names in automotive design, and she had leveraged that visibility to advocate for diversity and inclusion throughout the industry. The scholarship fund established by Lexus in her name had already provided full college funding for 12 students from underrepresented communities who were pursuing careers in automotive design and engineering. Jasmine personally mentored each scholarship recipient, sharing not just technical knowledge, but also the life lessons she had learned about perseverance and resilience. You're going to face challenges that have nothing to do with your abilities or qualifications, she told the scholarship recipients during their annual gathering. Some people will assume you don't belong, that you haven't earned your position, that you're only there because of affirmative action or diversity initiatives. Don't let those voices define you or limit your ambitions. The scholarship program had already begun to show results. 3 of the first recipients had completed internships at major automotive companies, and their work was receiving recognition from industry professionals. The pipeline of diverse talent that Jasmine had helped create was beginning to flow into the industry, slowly but steadily changing its demographics and perspectives. Jasmine's own work continued to push boundaries and challenge conventions. Her latest project, a concept car designed to showcase sustainable luxury, had been featured on the cover of Automotive Design magazine and was being considered for production by Lexus's parent company, Toyota. But perhaps her most meaningful professional achievement was her appointment to the board of directors of the Society of Automotive Engineers, making her the youngest person and only the 3rd African-American woman ever to serve in that capacity. The position gave her a platform to advocate for industry-wide changes in hiring, promotion, and design philosophy. Diversity isn't just a moral imperative, she told the Society's annual conference. It's a business imperative. When we limit our talent pool, we limit our potential for innovation. When we design products from a narrow perspective, we miss opportunities to serve broader markets. The automotive industry can't afford to waste talent or ignore market segments simply because of outdated assumptions about who belongs in our field. The standing ovation that followed her speech was a testament to how much the industry had changed since her arrest, but Jasmine knew there was still much work to be done. On the first anniversary of her arrest, Jasmine returned to the Westfield shopping center one more time. This time she was accompanied by her mother, Sandra, who had flown in from Cleveland to attend a ceremony honoring her daughter's contributions to police reform and community relations. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Sandra said as they walked across the same parking lot where the incident had occurred. "You turned something terrible into something beautiful." "I had a good example to follow," Jasmine replied, squeezing her mother's hand. "You taught me that setbacks are just setups for comebacks." The ceremony was smaller than the previous year's event, but the significance was no less profound. Chief Harrison presented Jasmine with a key to the city, and Mayor Webb announced that the parking lot where the arrest had occurred would be renamed Justice Plaza in honor of her courage and advocacy. "Miss Williams represents the best of what our community can be," Mayor Webb said in her remarks. "She faced injustice with dignity, responded to prejudice with perseverance, and transformed her pain into positive change for all of us." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, a young black girl approached Jasmine with her mother. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, looked up at Jasmine with wide, admiring eyes. "Miss Williams," the girl said shyly, "my mom says you design cars. Is that really your job?" "It is," Jasmine replied, kneeling down to the girl's eye level. "I get to imagine what cars will look like in the future and then help make those dreams into reality." "Could I do that too?" the girl asked. "Absolutely," Jasmine said with a warm smile. "What's your name?" "Aisha," the girl replied. "Well, Aisha, if you work hard in school, especially in math and science, and if you never give up on your dreams, you can do anything you set your mind to, even design cars." As Jasmine watched Aisha and her mother walk away, she thought about all the young people who might be inspired by her story to pursue careers they had never imagined possible. The arrest that had been intended to diminish her had instead amplified her voice and expanded her influence. Officer Bradley had made a mistake when he assumed Jasmine Williams was someone she wasn't. He had seen a black woman driving an expensive car and jumped to conclusions based on prejudice and stereotypes. What he failed to see was a brilliant, accomplished professional who had earned every success through talent and hard work. More importantly, he had failed to see someone who would not be silenced or intimidated. Someone who would use her experience as a catalyst for change and her platform to lift up others who faced similar challenges. The car that had triggered the incident, the midnight blue Lexus LS500, was now on display at the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., as part of an exhibit on contemporary civil rights struggles. A plaque next to the vehicle read, "This car was designed by Jasmine Williams, a groundbreaking automotive designer who used her wrongful arrest to advocate for police reform and greater diversity in her industry. Her courage and determination continue to inspire a new generation of designers and activists." But perhaps the most fitting tribute to Jasmine's impact was much simpler and more personal. 6 months after the anniversary ceremony, she received a handwritten letter from a young woman named Michelle Jackson, a freshman at Georgia Tech studying mechanical engineering. "Dear Miss Williams," the letter began, "I wanted to thank you for showing me that it's possible to be a black woman in automotive design. I grew up in Detroit, surrounded by cars, but never imagining I could help create them. Your story changed that. I'm now majoring in mechanical engineering with plans to pursue automotive design after graduation. When people ask me why I chose this field, I tell them about you. Thank you for showing me what's possible." Jasmine framed the letter and hung it in her office at Lexus, where it served as a daily reminder of why her fight had been worth it. Change was never easy, and progress was often slow. But every young person who dared to dream a little bigger because of her example made all the challenges worthwhile. The incident that had begun with Officer Bradley's assumptions and prejudices had transformed into something much larger and more meaningful. It had become a story about the power of one person to create change, the importance of accountability in law enforcement, and the ongoing struggle for equality and justice in America. But most importantly, it had become a story about hope. Hope that things could get better, that people could learn from their mistakes, and that the arc of justice, though long, truly did bend toward righteousness. Jasmine Williams had turned her worst day into her most meaningful victory, proving that sometimes the greatest triumphs come from the most challenging circumstances. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone that truth, like justice, has a way of prevailing when people have the courage to fight for it. The morning sun cast the same long shadows across the Westfield shopping center parking lot, but everything else had changed. Where once there had been assumptions and prejudice, there was now understanding and accountability. Where once there had been silence in the face of injustice, there was now a voice that refused to be quiet. And somewhere in Atlanta, a young girl named Aisha was drawing pictures of the cars she would design someday, inspired by a woman who had shown her that dreams, no matter how impossible they might seem, were always worth pursuing. Just like that, one arrest had become a catalyst for transformation. One woman's courage had sparked a movement for change. And one car, designed with skill and passion, had become a symbol of how talent and determination could overcome any obstacle.